Sarah Martinez sat in her small Honda Civic outside the family court building, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The manila envelope containing the final divorce papers lay on the passenger seat beside her, mocking her with its simple brown surface that represented the end of 8 years of marriage. She had been dreading this day for months, but now that it was finally here, she felt nothing but relief mixed with a strange emptiness. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps, and Sarah watched other people walking in and out of the building. Some looked happy, others appeared defeated, and a few seemed to be in the same emotional limbo that had become her constant companion over the past year. She glanced at her phone and saw it was already 9:15. Her appointment with the lawyer was at 9:30, which meant she needed to stop procrastinating and get inside. Taking a deep breath, Sarah grabbed the envelope and her purse, locked the car, and walked toward the imposing brick building. Each step felt heavier than the last, not because she was having second thoughts about the divorce, but because this moment represented such a final end to what had once been the most important relationship in her life. She and Michael had met in college, married young, and had spent nearly a decade trying to make something work that simply wasn't meant to be. The courthouse lobby buzzed with quiet activity. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried past with briefcases. Families sat on wooden benches looking nervous, and security guards checked bags, and metal detectors beeped regularly. Sarah found the directory and located her lawyer's office on the 3rd floor. The elevator ride felt eternal, and she found herself thinking about all the moments that had led to this day. Michael had been a good man, she reminded herself as she walked down the hallway looking for room 312. He wasn't abusive or cruel or unfaithful. They had simply grown into different people who wanted different things from life. He dreamed of traveling the world, starting his own business, living freely without the responsibilities that came with settling down. Sarah wanted stability, a home, children, and the kind of quiet happiness that came from building something lasting together. The conversations about their future had become arguments, then cold silences, and, finally, the awkward politeness of two people sharing space while living completely separate lives. They had tried counseling for 6 months, but even the therapist had gently suggested that sometimes two people could love each other and still not be compatible as life partners. Sarah Martinez? A woman's voice called from down the hallway. "That's me," Sarah replied, looking up to see her lawyer, Rebecca Chun, standing in an office doorway. Rebecca was a petite woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a reputation for handling divorces with compassion rather than the typical hostility that characterized many family law cases. "Come on in," Rebecca said, gesturing toward her office. "How are you feeling today?" "Like I'm about to close a very long chapter of my life," Sarah answered honestly as she settled into the chair across from Rebecca's desk. The office was warm and welcoming, with family photos and potted plants that made it feel less like a legal battlefield and more like a safe space for difficult conversations. Rebecca opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. "Well, I have good news. Michael's lawyer sent over his signatures yesterday, and everything is in order. This really is just a formality at this point. The judge will review the papers, ask you a few standard questions, and then it will be official." Sarah nodded, trying to ignore the weird fluttering sensation in her stomach. She had been nervous about this day for weeks, and now her body seemed to be manifesting that anxiety in physical ways. "How long will the whole process take?" "Maybe 20 minutes, Rebecca replied. "Judge Harrison is very efficient with uncontested divorces. He's seen enough messy cases that he appreciates when two people can end their marriage civilly." They spent the next few minutes reviewing the final terms of the divorce decree. The division of assets was straightforward since Sarah and Michael had never accumulated much wealth together. Sarah would keep the house, which still had a substantial mortgage, and Michael would keep his car and his photography equipment. They had no children, no shared business interests, and no significant debts beyond the mortgage and their individual student loans. "Any questions before we head to the courtroom?" Rebecca asked, gathering the papers into a neat stack. Sarah was about to say no when a sharp pain shot through her lower abdomen, so sudden and intense that she gasped and doubled over slightly. The pain was unlike anything she had experienced before, not like menstrual cramps or indigestion, but something entirely different that seemed to radiate from deep inside her body. "Are you okay?" Rebecca asked, leaning forward with concern. "I think so," Sarah managed, though the pain was getting worse rather than better. "It's probably just nerves. I haven't been sleeping well lately." But even as she said it, Sarah knew this wasn't anxiety. The pain was becoming more intense, accompanied by a wave of nausea that made her mouth water in the unpleasant way that usually preceded vomiting. She pressed her hand to her stomach and tried to breathe deeply, but the discomfort was overwhelming. "Sarah, you've gone very pale," Rebecca observed. "Maybe we should postpone this and get you to a doctor." "No," Sarah said quickly, though she was beginning to feel dizzy. "I've been waiting months for this to be over. I don't want to delay it any longer." She forced herself to stand up, but the movement made everything worse. The room seemed to tilt slightly, and she had to grab the back of her chair to steady herself. The pain in her abdomen was now accompanied by a strange cramping sensation that felt almost like what she remembered from her appendicitis attack in high school, but in a different location. "That's it," Rebecca said firmly, coming around the desk to support Sarah's arm. "We're getting you medical attention right now. The divorce can wait another day or two." "But Michael already signed everything," Sarah protested weakly. "What if he changes his mind?" "He won't," Rebecca assured her. "And even if he did, which he won't, we would deal with it. Your health is more important than paperwork." Rebecca called for her assistant to reschedule the court appearance while she helped Sarah back into the chair. The pain was coming in waves now, sometimes so intense that Sarah had to focus entirely on breathing, and other times subsiding enough that she almost thought it might be passing. "I'm going to call an ambulance," Rebecca said, reaching for her phone. "No, please," Sarah said. "I can't afford an ambulance ride. Can you just drive me to the urgent care clinic? There's one just a few blocks from here." Rebecca looked uncertain, but Sarah's fear of medical debt was greater than her physical discomfort. She had decent health insurance through her job at the elementary school where she taught third grade, but ambulance services were never covered well, and she was already worried about how she would manage financially as a single person. "All right," Rebecca agreed. "But if you get worse in the car, we're going straight to the emergency room." The walk to Rebecca's car was torturous. Sarah had to stop twice when the pain became too intense to move, and by the time they reached the vehicle, she was sweating despite the cool morning air. Rebecca drove carefully but quickly, asking frequently if Sarah was okay and threatening to change course to the hospital every time Sarah groaned or gasped. The urgent care clinic was busy but efficient. Sarah was triaged immediately when she described her symptoms, and within 15 minutes, she was lying on an examination table in a small, sterile room, wearing a paper gown and trying to answer a nurse's questions about her medical history. "When was your last menstrual period?" the nurse asked, typing Sarah's responses into a tablet. Sarah had to think for a moment. "Maybe 6 weeks ago. I've been under a lot of stress lately, so my cycle has been irregular." The nurse made a note and continued with her questions. "Any chance you could be pregnant?" The question hit Sarah like a physical blow. "No," she said immediately. "Absolutely not. My husband and I haven't been intimate in months, and we're getting divorced today." But even as she said it, Sarah's mind was racing backward, trying to remember. Had it really been months? There had been that night about 2 months ago when Michael had come home late from a photography assignment, and they had both been drinking wine while watching a movie. She remembered falling asleep on the couch together, and waking up in their bed the next morning with hazy memories of something that might have been more than just sleep. "Let's run some tests just to be sure," the nurse said kindly. "Stress can definitely cause the symptoms you're describing, but we want to rule out other possibilities." Dr. Patricia Williams entered the room a few minutes later. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and the kind of calm demeanor that immediately made patients feel better. She pressed gently on Sarah's abdomen, asking about the pain and when it had started. "The good news is that this doesn't feel like appendicitis," Dr. Williams said. "Your appendix is in the wrong location for the pain you're describing. But I'd like to run a few tests, including blood work and a urine sample, just to get a complete picture." Sarah provided the samples and then lay back on the examination table, staring at the ceiling tiles while she waited. Rebecca had stayed in the waiting room, probably dealing with the legal fallout of postponing the court appearance. Sarah felt guilty about disrupting everyone's schedule, but the pain was still intense enough that she couldn't imagine sitting through a court proceeding. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. Rebecca's office called. "Are you okay? Do you need me to come to the clinic?" Sarah stared at the message for a long time before responding. Even though they were about to be divorced, Michael was still fundamentally a caring person. If she told him she was scared and in pain, he would drop everything to be there, regardless of their relationship status. But that felt like opening a door that she had spent months trying to close. "I'm fine," she texted back. "Just food poisoning or something. Sorry about the delay." 20 minutes later, Dr. Williams returned with a folder and an expression that Sarah couldn't quite read. She sat down on the rolling stool next to the examination table and opened the folder. "Sarah, your blood work came back, and we need to talk," Dr. Williams said. "The urine test confirms that you are pregnant. Based on your hormone levels, I would estimate you're about 8 to 10 weeks along." The words seemed to echo in the small room, bouncing off the walls and hitting Sarah repeatedly. Pregnant. 8 to 10 weeks. The night she had half remembered with Michael suddenly became crystal clear in her memory. They had been watching an old romantic comedy, sharing a bottle of wine that had been a wedding gift they had never opened. The movie had made them nostalgic about their early relationship, and one thing had led to another. "That's not possible," Sarah whispered, though she knew it was entirely possible. "The tests are very accurate," Dr. Williams said gently, "and it explains your symptoms perfectly. What you're experiencing is likely morning sickness, which despite the name can happen at any time of day, especially when you're under stress." Sarah felt like the examination table was spinning beneath her. "But I'm supposed to be getting divorced today. This morning. Right now." "That's certainly a complicated situation," Dr. Williams acknowledged. "Are you and your husband trying to reconcile?" "No," Sarah said quickly. "We've been separated for almost a year. We're just not compatible. This doesn't change anything between us." But even as she said it, Sarah knew that wasn't true. This changed everything. Not necessarily their relationship, but certainly their lives. They would be connected forever now, whether they stayed married or not. And she would have to tell Michael, which meant admitting that she had been pregnant for 2 months without knowing it while they were finalizing their divorce. "I'd like to schedule you for an ultrasound to confirm the pregnancy and check on the baby's development," Dr. Williams continued. "And you should start taking prenatal vitamins immediately. Do you have an obstetrician?" Sarah shook her head, still processing the information. A baby. She was going to have a baby. The thing she had wanted most during her marriage was happening just as her marriage was ending. The irony was so overwhelming that she almost started laughing, except that nothing about this situation was actually funny. "I can recommend some excellent doctors," Dr. Williams said. "And there are also resources available if you need help navigating your options." This is obviously a big decision with a lot of factors to consider. Sarah knew what the doctor was diplomatically referring to. She could continue the pregnancy, or she could end it. She could tell Michael, or she could handle this alone. She could postpone the divorce, or she could proceed with it and raise the child as a single mother. Every choice led to a dozen more choices, and she felt completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of what lay ahead. "Can I have a few minutes alone?" Sarah asked. "Of course," Dr. Williams replied. "Take all the time you need. I'll be back in about 15 minutes to discharge you and give you some information about prenatal care." After the doctor left, Sarah lay on the examination table and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything that had happened in the past hour. She had walked into the courthouse that morning planning to end one chapter of her life, and instead she had discovered that an entirely new chapter was beginning. A chapter that would involve Michael whether they stayed married or not, because he was the father of the child growing inside her. She thought about their conversation 2 months ago, after that night they had spent together. They had both acknowledged that it had been a mistake, a moment of nostalgia and loneliness that didn't change their fundamental incompatibility. They had agreed that it made their decision to divorce even more clear because they couldn't keep confusing physical intimacy with emotional compatibility. But now there was going to be a baby. Sarah pulled out her phone and stared at Michael's contact information. She could call him right now and tell him everything. She could ask him to come to the clinic, and they could figure this out together. Or she could wait until she had time to process this information and decide what she wanted to do before involving him in the decision. The more she thought about it, the more complicated everything became. If she told Michael about the pregnancy, would he want to stay married for the sake of the child? Would he suggest ending the pregnancy so they could proceed with their original plan? Would he want to co-parent as divorce partners? None of those options felt right, but she couldn't think of any alternatives that felt better. Sarah's phone rang, startling her out of her thoughts. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen. "Hi," Sarah answered. "How are you feeling? What did the doctor say?" Sarah took a deep breath. "It's not food poisoning. I'm pregnant." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, Rebecca spoke. "Oh, Sarah, that certainly complicates things. I don't know what to do," Sarah admitted. "I haven't even told Michael yet." "Do you want me to postpone the divorce proceedings indefinitely?" Rebecca asked. "We can put everything on hold while you figure out what you want to do." "I don't know," Sarah said honestly. "I need time to think. Can you give me a week?" "Of course," Rebecca replied. "Take all the time you need. This is a big decision that shouldn't be rushed." After they hung up, Sarah continued staring at the ceiling. 8 weeks pregnant. If she had known 2 months ago, would she have told Michael before they finalized the separation? Would they have tried to make their marriage work for the sake of the baby? Or would they have made the same decision but with more information? The truth was that Sarah had always wanted children, and Michael had always been ambivalent about becoming a father. It was one of the many areas where they had never been able to find common ground. She had hoped that he would change his mind as they got older and more settled, and he had hoped that she would become more focused on their relationship and less concerned with starting a family. Now she was pregnant with the child she had always wanted by the man she was about to divorce, at the exact moment when she was supposed to be starting over as a single woman. The timing couldn't have been more complicated if she had planned it that way. Dr. Williams returned with discharge papers and information about prenatal care. Sarah scheduled an appointment with an obstetrician for the following week and drove home in a daze, her mind spinning with questions that had no easy answers. Her house felt different when she walked inside, as if the news of her pregnancy had changed the very air. This was the home she had planned to live in alone, the place where she would rebuild her life after divorce. Now it might become the home where she would raise a child, either alone or with a co-parent who lived somewhere else. Sarah sat on her couch and looked around the living room. The walls needed painting, the furniture was old and mismatched, and the whole place had the sad, neglected feeling of a home where two people had been going through the motions of living together without actually sharing a life. But it could be different. It could be warm and welcoming and full of the kind of love that she had always imagined filling a family home. The question was whether that family would include Michael or whether she would be creating that warmth and love entirely on her own. Her phone buzzed with another text from Michael. "Rebecca said you postponed the court date. Everything okay?" Sarah stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I need to talk to you about something important." His response came quickly. "Of course. Everything okay between us?" The morning sunlight filtered through the large windows of Corner Cafe, casting a warm glow across the wooden tables where Sarah sat nervously stirring her decaffeinated coffee. She had arrived 15 minutes early, needing time to prepare herself for what might be one of the most important conversations of her life. The cafe was bustling with the usual morning crowd, business people grabbing quick breakfasts, students hunched over laptops, and elderly couples sharing newspapers over their morning coffee. Sarah had barely slept the night before, running through dozens of different ways to tell Michael that she was pregnant. Every approach seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what she needed to communicate. How do you tell someone you're about to divorce that you're carrying their child? How do you explain that one night of nostalgia has completely changed the trajectory of both your lives? She watched the door anxiously, checking her phone every few minutes, even though she knew Michael would be punctual. He was always punctual, just like he was always considerate and thoughtful and everything that should have made him a perfect husband. The problem had never been his character. It had been their fundamental differences about what they wanted from life. At exactly 10 o'clock, Michael walked through the cafe door, scanning the room until he spotted Sarah in their usual corner booth. Even after months of separation and the emotional distance that had grown between them, her heart still fluttered slightly when she saw him. He looked tired, with the kind of deep exhaustion that came from more than just lack of sleep, but he still had the easy smile that had first attracted her to him 8 years ago. "Hey," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "You look pale. Are you feeling better than yesterday?" "Not exactly," Sarah replied, realizing that her morning sickness was actually worse today than it had been during her dramatic episode at the lawyer's office. The smell of bacon from a nearby table was making her stomach churn, and she had to concentrate on not grimacing. Michael ordered black coffee and a blueberry muffin, the same breakfast he had been eating since college. Some things never changed, Sarah thought, which made what she was about to tell him even more surreal. In 10 minutes, his entire life was going to be different, and he was sitting there calmly ordering breakfast as if this were just another friendly meeting between two people who were ending their marriage amicably. "So what's going on?" Michael asked after the waitress left. Rebecca's office was pretty vague about why the court date got postponed. "They just said you had a medical issue." Sarah took a deep breath and looked directly at him. There was no good way to ease into this conversation, no gentle transition that would make the news any less shocking. "Michael, I need to tell you something that's going to change everything. I'm pregnant." Michael's hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup, and, for a moment, he seemed frozen in place. Then, he slowly set the cup down and stared at her with an expression that was completely unreadable. "Pregnant," he repeated, as if he were trying to process a word in a foreign language. "About 8 weeks," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found out yesterday at the clinic. That's why I was in so much pain. Morning sickness, not food poisoning." 8 weeks, Michael said, still looking stunned. "That would be the night we watched that old movie," Sarah confirmed. "The night we both said was a mistake." Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Sarah recognized from their countless difficult conversations over the past year. He did it when he was trying to buy time to think, trying to process information that felt too big for immediate comprehension. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "I saw the test results myself," Sarah replied. "Blood test, urine test, hormone levels. There's no doubt." The waitress returned with Michael's coffee and muffin, but he didn't seem to notice. He was staring out the window at the busy street, watching people walk past who were going about their normal lives while his own life had just been completely upended. "What do you want to do?" he asked eventually, turning his attention back to Sarah. It was such a loaded question that Sarah wasn't sure where to begin answering it. What did she want to do about the pregnancy? About their marriage? About the divorce that was supposed to have been finalized yesterday? About the fact that they were going to be connected for the rest of their lives whether they stayed together or not? "I want to keep the baby," Sarah said firmly. That was the one decision she had made with absolute certainty. "I know it's complicated and the timing is terrible, but I want this child." Michael nodded slowly. "Okay, that's your choice to make." "It's our choice," Sarah corrected. "You're the father. Your opinion matters. But, ultimately, it's your body and your decision," Michael replied. "I respect whatever you choose." Sarah felt a flash of frustration at his diplomatic response. This was exactly the kind of emotional distance that had driven them apart in the first place. She wanted him to have an opinion, to express some feeling about the fact that they were going to have a child together. His careful neutrality felt like another wall between them. "What I want to know," Sarah said, "is how you feel about becoming a father. Not whether you support my decision, but how you actually feel about it." Michael was quiet for a long time, turning his coffee cup in small circles on the table. "Honestly, I'm terrified. We've been planning to divorce for months. We've spent the last year learning that we want different things from life. And now we're going to be responsible for another human being together." "That doesn't answer my question," Sarah pressed. "How do you feel about the baby? Not about the situation, but about the fact that you're going to be a father?" Michael looked at her directly for the first time since she had told him the news. "I don't know yet. 2 days ago, I was planning to be single and travel and focus on my photography. Now I'm going to be someone's dad. I can't process that quickly enough to have meaningful feelings about it." Sarah appreciated his honesty, even though it wasn't what she wanted to hear. She had been hoping for some sign that this unexpected pregnancy might bridge the gap between them, might give them a reason to try again. Instead, Michael seemed as distant as ever, approaching the situation with the same logical detachment that had characterized their relationship problems. "What does this mean for the divorce?" Michael asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. We could go ahead with it and figure out custody arrangements. We could postpone it and try to work things out. We could get divorced and then decide later if we want to try again as parents. None of the options feel right. Do you want to try again? Michael asked. Do you think having a baby together changes anything fundamental about our relationship? Sarah had been asking herself the same question since yesterday, and she still didn't have a clear answer. I want to try again, she said slowly. I want this baby to have a family, not just two parents who live in different places and share custody. But I also don't want us to stay together for the wrong reasons and end up resenting each other and the child. We've never been able to agree on what we want from life, Michael pointed out. Having a baby doesn't change the fact that you want stability and roots, and I want freedom and adventure. But maybe having a child would help you understand why stability matters, Sarah suggested. Maybe being responsible for someone else would change your priorities. Or maybe it would make me feel trapped and resentful, Michael replied. Maybe I would spend the next 18 years wishing I could escape, which wouldn't be fair to you or the baby. It was a brutally honest response that cut to the heart of Sarah's fears. She had always known that Michael felt constrained by conventional domestic life, but she had hoped that fatherhood might awaken some instinct for family that would override his desire for independence. So what do we do? Sarah asked. I think we need time, Michael said. This is too big a decision to make over coffee the morning after we found out. We need to really think about what we want and what's best for everyone involved. Sarah felt tears starting to form, though she wasn't sure if they were from disappointment, hormones, or simple exhaustion. How much time? A few weeks? A month? Long enough to get used to the idea and figure out what we really want, not just what we think we should want. And what happens to the divorce proceedings in the meantime? We put them on hold, Michael said without hesitation. Whatever we decide about our marriage, we shouldn't rush into making it official while there are so many unknowns. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Sarah watched Michael pick at his muffin without eating it, and wondered what was going through his mind. Was he imagining himself as a father? Was he thinking about baby names or college funds or teaching a child to ride a bicycle? Or was he calculating how much child support would cost and whether he could still afford to travel? There's something else we need to talk about, Sarah said eventually. Money. Michael looked up from his untouched breakfast. What about it? If we go through with the divorce, I'll be a single mother on a teacher's salary. If we stay married, you'll need to find a more stable income than freelance photography. Either way, our financial situation is going to be completely different. I've been thinking about that, Michael said. Actually, I've been thinking about it for months, even before this. I got an offer last month to join a photography studio downtown. Full-time position with benefits and a steady paycheck. I turned it down because I thought I was going to be single and free to take freelance jobs anywhere in the country. And now I'm thinking I should call them back and see if the position is still available. Sarah felt a small flicker of hope. Michael had always resisted the idea of steady employment, claiming that it would kill his creativity and turn him into the kind of conventional person he had never wanted to become. The fact that he was even considering it suggested that he was taking the pregnancy seriously and thinking about practical responsibilities. Would you be happy working for someone else? Sarah asked. I don't know, Michael admitted. But happiness might not be the most important consideration anymore. If I'm going to be a father, I need to be able to provide consistent financial support. They were interrupted by Sarah's phone buzzing with a text message. She glanced at it and saw a reminder about her obstetrician appointment the following week. The reality of the pregnancy suddenly felt more concrete and immediate. I have a doctor's appointment next Thursday, she said, to confirm everything and do an ultrasound. Do you want to come? Michael hesitated, and Sarah could see him wrestling with the decision. Going to the appointment would make everything feel more real and would represent a level of involvement that he might not be ready for. But not going would send the message that he was planning to be an absent father, which wasn't fair either. Yeah, he said finally. I want to be there. Okay, Sarah replied, feeling another small surge of hope. I'll text you the details. They finished their coffee in relative silence, both overwhelmed by the enormity of what they were facing. When they left the cafe, they stood awkwardly on the sidewalk, not sure how to say goodbye. Were they still separated spouses heading toward divorce, or were they expectant parents trying to figure out their relationship? The situation was too unprecedented to have established protocols. "I'll call you this weekend," Michael said. "Maybe we can talk more about what we want to do." "Okay," Sarah agreed. "I think I need a few days to process everything too." Michael started to walk away, then turned back. "Sarah, for what it's worth, I'm glad you told me right away. I know this is complicated, but I want to be involved in whatever decisions we make." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "I was worried you might want to pretend it wasn't happening." "I'm not that kind of person," Michael said. "We may not know what we want yet, but we'll figure it out together." Sarah watched him walk away until he disappeared around the corner, then got in her car and drove home feeling emotionally drained but slightly more optimistic than she had the day before. Michael hadn't reacted with joy, but he also hadn't reacted with panic or anger. He was approaching the situation with the same thoughtful consideration he brought to most major decisions, which was both reassuring and frustrating. At home, Sarah called her sister Emma, the one person in the world who knew her well enough to provide honest advice without judgment. Emma lived 3 hours away with her husband and 2 young children, and Sarah had always envied the warm, chaotic family life her sister had created. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said when Emma answered the phone. "And I need you to listen to the whole story before you say anything." "That sounds ominous," Emma replied. "But, okay, I'm listening." Sarah told her everything. The divorce proceedings, the sudden pain at the lawyer's office, the pregnancy diagnosis, and the difficult conversation with Michael that morning. Emma listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or concern. "Wow," Emma said when Sarah finished. "That is a lot to process." "Tell me what to do," Sarah said. "Tell me whether I should try to make my marriage work or get divorced and raise this baby alone." "I can't tell you that," Emma replied gently. "But I can tell you that having a baby with someone you're not sure you want to be with is incredibly hard. And raising a child alone is also incredibly hard. Neither choice is easy." "That's not helpful," Sarah said, though she knew Emma was right. "What I can tell you," Emma continued, "is that you need to base this decision on what you actually want, not on what you think you should want or what would be easiest for other people." "Do you still love Michael?" Sarah was quiet for a long time. "I love the person he is, but I don't love the life we had together." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Emma replied. "Do you think he could change enough to build the kind of life you want? And, more importantly, do you think he wants to change?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "He said he's thinking about taking a steady job, which is a big change for him. But I don't know if he's doing it because he wants to or because he feels obligated." "Those are good questions to ask him," Emma suggested. "And you also need to ask yourself whether you could be happy staying married to him if he doesn't change as much as you hope." After they hung up, Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon doing research online about pregnancy, child-rearing costs, and single parenthood. The financial reality was daunting. Even with child support, raising a child on her teacher's salary would require significant sacrifices. She would need to move to a smaller house, give up most of her discretionary spending, and probably work summer school every year to make ends meet. But as she read about pregnancy milestones and baby development, Sarah felt a growing sense of excitement that surprised her. She had wanted to be a mother for so long that the practical challenges seemed less important than the opportunity to finally have the family she had always dreamed about. That evening, she found herself walking through her house and imagining how it would need to change to accommodate a baby. The spare bedroom that had become Michael's photography studio could be converted to a nursery. The living room would need to be baby-proofed. The quiet, adult space she had been planning to enjoy as a single woman would become the warm, noisy home she had always wanted to create. The question was whether Michael would be part of that vision or whether she would be creating it entirely on her own. As she fell asleep that night, Sarah realized that either way, her life was about to become infinitely richer and more meaningful than anything she had experienced during her years of marital discord. The next morning brought another wave of morning sickness, but this time Sarah found herself smiling through the nausea. In 7 months, she was going to be holding her baby. Everything else, the marriage, the divorce, the financial challenges, the co-parenting arrangements, would eventually work itself out. The only thing that truly mattered was that she was going to become the mother she had always wanted to be. Her phone rang while she was eating dry toast and trying to keep her breakfast down. Michael's name appeared on the screen. "Hi," she answered. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," he said without preamble. "And I want you to know that regardless of what happens between us, I'm committed to being a good father. I may not be ready to be a husband, but I want to be involved in this child's life." "Thank you," Sarah replied, feeling tears of relief. "That means everything to me." "I called about the photography studio job," Michael continued. "They still want me. I start Monday." Sarah set down her toast, suddenly, understanding that Michael was making the first of what would probably be many sacrifices for their unborn child. "Are you sure that's what you want?" "It's what I need to do," Michael replied. "And maybe what I want will change as I get used to the idea of being responsible for someone else." For the first time since the pregnancy diagnosis, Sarah felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Whether they stayed married or divorced, she and Michael were going to figure out how to give their child the love and stability that every baby deserved. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's shocking discovery at the urgent care clinic, and she was finally starting to feel like she could breathe again. The initial panic had given way to a cautious optimism as she and Michael slowly figured out how to navigate their new reality as expectant parents who were technically still married but living separately. Thursday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching Sarah's nervous energy as she prepared for her first official prenatal appointment. She had been experiencing morning sickness regularly. Her clothes were already feeling tighter around her waist, and she had started taking prenatal vitamins religiously, but nothing would make the pregnancy feel completely real until she heard the baby's heartbeat. Michael had called the night before to confirm that he would meet her at Dr. Amanda Rodriguez's office at 10 o'clock. Over the past few weeks, they had been spending more time together, having dinner twice a week, and long conversations about everything from baby names to childcare arrangements. It felt strange to be growing closer to him just as they had been preparing to legally separate, but Sarah was grateful that they were at least moving in a positive direction. The waiting room at the women's health clinic was filled with women in various stages of pregnancy. Sarah watched a couple excitedly discussing nursery colors while the woman rubbed her prominent belly, and she tried to imagine herself and Michael having similar conversations in a few months. It was still hard to picture, especially since they hadn't officially decided whether to stay married or proceed with the divorce as planned co-parents. "Sarah Martinez?" A nurse called from the doorway. "That's me," Sarah replied, standing up. She looked around the waiting room, but didn't see Michael yet. He was running late, which was unusual for him, but understandable given that he had started his new job at the photography studio and was still adjusting to a more structured schedule. "Is your partner coming?" the nurse asked kindly. "He should be here any minute," Sarah said, checking her phone. No messages from Michael, which probably meant he was stuck in traffic or dealing with some work emergency. The nurse, whose name tag read Jennifer, led Sarah down a hallway lined with posters about prenatal nutrition and fetal development. "Don't worry, we can wait a few minutes for him to arrive. First appointments are always special, and it's nice when both parents can be here." Sarah was weighing herself when she heard Michael's voice in the hallway, apologizing profusely to Jennifer for being late. A few minutes later, he appeared in the examination room looking slightly out of breath and carrying a small bouquet of daisies. "Sorry," he said, handing Sarah the flowers. "My new boss decided this morning would be perfect for an impromptu staff meeting. I couldn't exactly say I needed to leave for a prenatal appointment without explaining why." "You didn't tell them about the baby?" Sarah asked, surprised. Michael had always been very private about his personal life, but she had assumed he would need to mention the pregnancy to his employer eventually. "Not yet," Michael replied. "I wanted to wait until after this appointment. Make sure everything looks good." Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety at his words. "What if everything doesn't look good?" "Then we'll deal with whatever we need to deal with," Michael said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "But let's assume everything will be fine." It was such a Michael response, practical and optimistic without being unrealistic. Sarah had forgotten how reassuring his steady presence could be in stressful situations. For the first time in months, she felt like they were actually a team working together toward the same goal. Dr. Rodriguez entered the room a few minutes later, carrying Sarah's file and wearing the kind of warm smile that immediately put patients at ease. She was a woman in her late 40s with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and the confident manner of someone who had delivered hundreds of babies. "Good morning," she said, shaking hands with both Sarah and Michael. "I'm Dr. Rodriguez, and I understand this is going to be our first look at your baby. Are you both excited?" "Nervous," Sarah admitted, "but excited too." "That's completely normal," Dr. Rodriguez assured her. "First pregnancies can feel overwhelming, especially when they're unexpected. Let's start with some questions about your medical history, and then we'll do the ultrasound." They spent the next 10 minutes going through Sarah's health history, family medical background, and current symptoms. Dr. Rodriguez asked about everything from Sarah's diet and exercise habits to her stress levels and support system. When she asked about the father's involvement, Sarah and Michael exchanged a glance. "It's complicated," Sarah said finally. "We're married, but separated, and we found out about the pregnancy while we were finalizing our divorce. We're trying to figure out what that means for our relationship and for the baby." "That is complicated," Dr. Rodriguez agreed. "But what I can tell you is that babies thrive when their parents are committed to working together, regardless of their romantic relationship. The most important thing is that you both want what's best for your child." "We do," Michael said immediately. "We may not know exactly what our family is going to look like, but we both want this baby to be loved and cared for." "That's an excellent foundation," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "Now, let's take a look at how your little one is developing." Sarah lay back on the examination table while Dr. Rodriguez prepared the ultrasound machine. The gel was cold against her still flat stomach, and she shivered slightly as the doctor moved the transducer around, searching for the best angle to capture images of the baby. "There we go," Dr. Rodriguez said, pointing to the screen. "Do you see that little blob right there? That's your baby." Sarah stared at the fuzzy black and white image, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. It looked more like abstract art than a human being, but somewhere in that grainy picture was her child. Michael moved closer to the screen, studying the image with the same focused attention he brought to analyzing photographs. "It's so small," he said quietly. "About the size of a grape at this stage," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "But perfectly formed and developing exactly as expected. Now, let's see if we can hear the heartbeat." She adjusted the ultrasound settings, and suddenly, the room filled with a rapid, rhythmic whooshing sound that seemed impossibly loud and incredibly fragile at the same time. Sarah felt tears start to flow before she even realized she was crying. "That's your baby's heartbeat," Dr. Rodriguez said with a smile. "Nice and strong at 165 beats per minute, which is exactly what we want to see at 11 weeks. Sarah looked at Michael and saw that his eyes were also watery. He was staring at the screen with an expression of wonder that she hadn't seen on his face since their wedding day. For a moment, all of their complications and uncertainties faded away, and they were just two people marveling at the miracle of the life they had created together. "Can we get a picture?" Michael asked. "Of course," Dr. Rodriguez replied, printing several copies of the ultrasound image. Most parents like to have a few to share with family and friends. As the appointment continued, Dr. Rodriguez explained what Sarah could expect over the next few months, discussed nutrition and exercise recommendations, and scheduled the next appointment for 4 weeks later. Sarah found herself taking mental notes about everything from which prenatal vitamins to take to warning signs that would require immediate medical attention. "Any questions before you go?" Dr. Rodriguez asked as she updated Sarah's file. "When do we need to start making decisions about things like where to deliver and whether we want genetic testing?" Sarah asked. "We'll discuss all of those options at your next appointment," Dr. Rodriguez replied. "For now, just focus on taking care of yourself and letting your body adjust to the changes that are happening." When they left the medical building, Sarah and Michael stood in the parking lot for a few minutes, both seeming reluctant to return to their normal routines after sharing such an emotional experience. The ultrasound pictures were tucked safely in Sarah's purse, but she kept thinking about the sound of the baby's heartbeat. "That was incredible," Michael said finally. "I know," Sarah agreed. "It made everything feel so real. Do you want to get lunch?" Michael asked. "I called in sick for the rest of the day after my boss's impromptu meeting, so I have time." "I'd like that," Sarah replied. They drove separately to a small cafe near Sarah's house, the same place where they used to go for weekend brunch during the early years of their marriage. It felt both nostalgic and hopeful to be there together, sharing a meal and talking about their future in a way they hadn't done in years. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Rodriguez said," Michael said as they waited for their food to arrive. "About babies thriving when their parents work together regardless of their romantic relationship." "What about it?" Sarah asked. "I think she's right," Michael said. "And I think we've been so focused on whether we should stay married or get divorced that we haven't really talked about what kind of parents we want to be." Sarah considered this. "What kind of parent do you want to be?" "Present," Michael said without hesitation. "I want to be involved in all the big moments, and most of the little ones too. I want to know my child's favorite foods and biggest fears, and what makes them laugh." "That sounds like you want to be more than just a weekend parent," Sarah observed. "I do," Michael admitted. "I've been thinking about that a lot. Even if we get divorced, I don't want to be the kind of father who only sees his kid every other weekend. I want to be part of their daily life." "That would mean staying in the same city," Sarah pointed out. "No more dreams of traveling the country as a freelance photographer." "I know," Michael said. "And I'm okay with that. Actually, I'm more than okay with it. This job at the studio is turning out to be more interesting than I expected. I'm learning new techniques and working with different types of clients. It's not the creative prison I thought it would be." Sarah felt a surge of hope mixed with caution. "Are you saying this because you think it's what I want to hear, or because it's actually how you feel?" "Both," Michael replied honestly. "I want you to know that I'm serious about being a committed father. But I also genuinely feel different about everything since we heard that heartbeat today. It's like someone turned on a light in a part of my brain that I didn't know existed." Their food arrived, but neither of them seemed very interested in eating. They were too caught up in a conversation that felt more honest and productive than any they had shared in the final year of their marriage. "I have something to tell you too," Sarah said. "I've been doing some thinking about what kind of mother I want to be, and I realized that part of the reason I wanted children so badly was because I thought having a family would fix whatever was wrong between us." "And now?" Michael asked. "Now I know that's not fair to the baby," Sarah continued. "Children shouldn't be responsible for saving their parents' relationship. If we stay together, it should be because we genuinely want to build a life together, not because we feel obligated to for the sake of the child. So what do you think we should do?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I think we should try. Not try to go back to the way things were, but try to build something new together. We're already different people than we were a year ago, and becoming parents is going to change us even more. Like dating each other again, but with the knowledge of everything that didn't work the first time." "Exactly," Sarah said. "We know our problems now. We know that you need more independence than I originally understood, and I need more security than you originally provided. Maybe we can figure out how to give each other those things." "What would that look like practically?" Michael asked. "I don't know yet," Sarah admitted. "Maybe you travel sometimes for work, but always come home to us. Maybe I learn to be more flexible about spontaneous adventures. Maybe we find ways to compromise that we were too young and stubborn to consider before." They spent the next hour talking through possibilities, from living arrangements to financial planning to how they would handle disagreements about parenting decisions. It was an easy conversation. There were still fundamental differences between them that wouldn't disappear just because they were having a baby together, but it felt more hopeful than any discussion they had shared in years. "There's one more thing," Michael said as they prepared to leave the cafe. "I want to call off the divorce officially. Not because I think we should definitely stay married forever, but because I want us to have time to figure out what we really want without the pressure of legal deadlines." "How much time?" Sarah asked. "Until the baby is born," Michael suggested. 6 months to really try to build something good together. If it's not working by then, we can revisit the divorce, but we'll do it as co-parents who respect each other instead of as people who couldn't make their marriage work. Sarah felt tears gathering again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than anxiety. "I think that's the smartest thing either of us has said in the past year." That afternoon, Sarah called Rebecca to officially withdraw the divorce petition. The lawyer was surprised but supportive, especially when Sarah explained that she and Michael wanted to focus on preparing for parenthood rather than ending their legal relationship. It's not uncommon for couples to reconsider divorce when children are involved, Rebecca said. Just make sure you're both being honest about your motivations and realistic about your expectations. We are, Sarah assured her. We know it might not work out, but we also know we need to try. That evening, Michael came over for dinner, and they spent time looking at the ultrasound pictures and discussing practical matters like when to tell their families about the pregnancy and how to prepare Sarah's house for a baby. It felt domestic and comfortable in a way their relationship hadn't been in years. As Michael was leaving, he paused at the front door. Sarah, thank you for giving us another chance. I know I haven't always been the partner you needed, but I want to be better. For you and for our baby. Thank you for being willing to try, Sarah replied. And Michael, I think we're going to be really good parents together. After he left, Sarah sat on her couch with her hands resting on her stomach, listening to the quiet house and imagining what it would sound like in a few months when it was filled with baby sounds. For the first time in over a year, she felt genuinely optimistic about her future. The next morning brought the usual wave of morning sickness, but Sarah found herself smiling through the nausea. In 6 months, she would be holding her baby. In 6 months, she would know whether she and Michael had managed to rebuild their relationship into something stronger and more honest than what they had before. Either way, she was going to be a mother, and that dream was finally becoming a beautiful reality. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Good morning to you, and great baby. Hope you're feeling okay today. Sarah smiled as she typed back. We're both fine. Looking forward to 6 months of figuring this out together. Me too, came his immediate reply, followed by a heart emoji that made Sarah's own heart flutter with possibility. As she got ready for work, Sarah realized that her story wasn't ending with divorce as she had planned 3 weeks ago. Instead, it was beginning with the most important chapter of her life, becoming a mother and, possibly, with patience and commitment and a lot of hard work, becoming part of the family she had always dreamed of creating. Can we have dinner tonight? Michael asked. I want to talk more about what comes next. I'd like that, Sarah replied. As they made plans to meet, Sarah realized that they were no longer two people trying to end their relationship, but two people trying to build something entirely new together. It might not be the marriage they had originally planned, but it could be something even more important, a family. We'll talk tomorrow, she replied. Sarah spent the rest of the day researching prenatal care, reading about pregnancy symptoms, and trying to imagine what her life would look like in 8 months. By evening, she had made one decision. She was going to continue the pregnancy. The idea of ending it had crossed her mind, but every time she considered it seriously, she knew it wasn't the right choice for her. The question now was how to tell Michael and what to do about their marriage. The divorce papers were signed and ready to file, but nothing was official yet. They could still change their minds, but Sarah wasn't sure that staying married for the sake of a baby was any better than getting divorced while pregnant. As she fell asleep that night, Sarah placed her hand on her still flat stomach and tried to imagine the tiny life growing inside her. Tomorrow, everything would change again. Tomorrow, Michael would know that he was going to be a father, and they would have to figure out how to navigate this new reality together, whether as a married couple, divorced co-parents, or something in between. The only thing she knew for certain was that her quiet, predictable life was about to become infinitely more complicated and hopefully more meaningful than anything she had ever imagined.